Welcome to JGTCR, I'm Cope, and today we are tuning the Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo. Let's get into it. In factory trim, this vehicle is horrid. Its ride height is way too low and the wheels are far too big. And while it does drive reasonably now, before update 1.52, this S2000 couldn't even make it to the start-finish line of the Nürburgring at the start of a time trial without understeering into oblivion. Thankfully, the more recent updates have rectified many of these issues. However, the poor handling characteristics still remain. In particular, we will find quite a lot of understeer while cornering. Even in factory trim, it is recommended to reduce the wheel size to the smallest diameter possible and be sure to run them in a narrow offset. This will reduce the tires making contact with the body. When it comes to power, there is quite a bit being sent to the rear wheels. This makes it very tail happy, particularly when exiting corners. As such, it's best practice to stay in low RPM while cornering and short shift while getting back on throttle on corner exit. Even in top gear on long sweeping turns, we are at risk of losing tractions and going sideways. So this vehicle is very much Snappy Tom certified. There is plenty of downforce to go around, so handling is good as long as it's within the limitations of the tires. When it comes to braking, they lock up very easily. So taking our time and braking gradually is essential to slow down enough to make the turns. So move those brake markers back and adjust accordingly. Now let's collect that time. 6 minutes 59.2 seconds. Let's get to tuning. Nothing too out of the ordinary with this tune. We jacked up the ride height to almost max, with the front being slightly lower than the rear. The natural frequency is softer at the rear than the front, and we added more camber up front for better grip while cornering, and also to help the wheels not make contact with the wheel arches. Let's head out to the Nürburgring. When it came to upgrades for this S2000, there wasn't too much available, but what was there did make a big difference, especially when coupled with a tune that addresses some of the many issues that come with the default settings. The upgrade to racing soft tires has made a huge difference. Acceleration is better with far less wheel spin. But the biggest improvement comes under braking. No more locking up and wriggling around the track when we jump on the anchors. Braking is now solid and stable, and with all the additional downforce, there is not a lot that can go wrong. Every single aspect of this vehicle has improved, and the proof is in the drive feel when attacking corners. Let's jump ahead and collect our time. 6 minutes 33.9 seconds. On to the drift tune. A simple drift tune with changes to negative camber angle, differential and downforce settings only. And of course, tires. Time to drift. There is a lot to be said about the Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo as a drift car. The first is that it is stable in almost any drift condition. Regardless of the drifting style applied, this S2K is ready to comply. It is very responsive to inputs and easy to place on the track. And while making adjustments may appear to be squirrely from the outside, on the inside they're as smooth as butter. The steering is sharp and accurate and always takes you where you want to go. Transitions while drifting are a simple affair and happen naturally without any jankiness. Adjustments at any point while drifting are not only acceptable, they are welcomed and encouraged. This agility means we are prepared for anything a drift pass in traffic can throw at us. When it comes to power, there is more than enough to keep the wheels spinning and the smoke pouring from the tail end. It is not aggressive in any way and can be utilized in high or low RPM applications. It really is the dealer's choice. Now let's do an engine swap. It really is a strange sensation driving the Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo with the engine swap. It has a lazy power delivery, but is still very slippy even when out of the power band. Again, it's best to short shift and use low RPM when cornering. The engine conversion itself has made the vehicle lighter, but somehow the nose feels heavier. The result of these changes means that we go into a corner understeering and exit oversteering. Considering the chaos this vehicle is in factory trim, it's actually not too bad with just the engine swap. The steering isn't great, but it does the job, and we can blame this on the tyres. But what we do know is that when we upgrade the Amuse S2K, that the handling will improve tenfold. Let's collect our time. Six minutes 57 seconds flat. It's tune time. With understeer getting the better of us, our focus was on getting traction up front. Body height adjustment is lower at the front than the rear to shift the weight forward and help gain traction up front. The natural frequency at the front was made softer for this same reason. We added negative camber angle and also ballast over the front wheels, again to defeat understeer. Let's see how it performs on the Nürburgring. When completely modified and tuned, the Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo with the engine swap is still way too tail happy for its own good. The power delivery is very aggressive, and even mild acceleration can kick the rear end out. We must use caution when applying the throttle in almost any condition, so throttle modulation is advised for those seeking best results. When it comes to understeer, there are always issues to contend with. No matter how we approach the turn, it should always be at the forefront of our mind that understeer could very well ruin your lap. We have tuned out the understeer as best as we can, but it can rear its ugly head when we least expect it. The brakes are solid with very little issues, but it is best to get our braking done in a straight line. Let's collect our time. 6 minutes 18.5 seconds. And now the drift tune. It's back to basics with this drift tune. The body height adjustment is lower at the rear than the front, giving us a squatting stance. Our settings for anti-roll bar and natural frequency are softer at the rear than they are at the front. This helps us with our directional drift. Our camber angle is maxed both front and rear, again for control and directional drift. Acceleration and braking sensitivity were both reduced to a minimum in the differential gear, as the power delivery was just far too aggressive and continued to spin us out. And finally, we added 40 points of ballast at a ballast position of -40 to slow the drift down and give us more of a pendulum effect. Let's go drifting. The Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo with the engine swap has a lot of power. And that is the entirety of the list of good things to say about this vehicle as a drift car. While there is a lot of power to be had, the delivery of that power is very aggressive. This makes finding the sweet spot for a nice drift very difficult to find. The engine has a peaky blinder's nature, yet despises bouncing off limiter during drift and will take you for a spin. It's best practice to use a medium to medium-high RPM range to maintain control while drifting. If we dare venture into the high RPM range, we run the high risk of mowing the grass and facing the wrong way. When it comes to adjustment during drift and transitions, this S2K can be quite snappy-tom indeed. So it's best to be smooth and calculated with our inputs and not just throw it in and hope for the best. The combination fried rice of engine and chassis may work together in a race application, but they are far from a match made in heaven in the drift arena. The Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo gets off to a bit of a rough start in factory trim. The default settings make it difficult to drive, and as they say, first impressions last. As such, it can be one of those cars that don't get a second look after a test drive. When modifying, the most important factor to adjust is the ride height. This is literally the key to unlocking its drivability. Once set up properly, the Amuse S2K becomes a dream to drive. Powerful, nimble, with a nice flow to the drive. As a drift car, it excels. Fluid drifts aplenty that are straightforward to control. Overall, it's a great package deal worth investing time and credits in. With the engine swap, the Amuse S2000 GT1 Turbo has some significant changes to the drive characteristics. It is both more inclined to understeer and oversteer, making it somewhat unpredictable at times. When modified, much of our efforts are spent reducing the prominent understeer, which can be dulled out but does remain present in its nature. This does leave the oversteer to run rampant, but it is quite fun to throw into the corners. As a drift car, it is capable but moody. While not completely unforgiving, it will bite if given the chance, making it Snappy Tom certified. And that's all we have for you today, so until next time, keep racing!